Social Security is in the spotlight, and if your check is part of your monthly survival plan, these updates are too important to skim past because the dollars and the timing are spelled out in ways that can change how you budget. Here's the twist. Millions of Americans are watching for increases. One big boost is already here, and several 2026 changes tied to Social Security are either rolling out or being pushed that could expand what lands in your account, including one proposed adjustment described as capable of putting an extra $300 to $500 in your pocket. This touches retirement benefits, disability benefits, SSI, and survivor benefits. So no matter which category you fall into, the core mission is the same. Make sure you don't miss a single dollar you're entitled to. Stick with the full breakdown because there are practical action steps at the end that are meant to help push for even bigger increases. And that matters because policy rarely shifts unless people make noise in large numbers. Even for people who have followed benefits for years, the payment calendar can feel like a maze with different rules depending on the type of benefits you receive and the date you were born. So the goal here is to cut through the government-style jargon and turn it into information you can actually use without a headache. If you're new to following benefit updates, know this. The schedule alone is confusing enough to trip people up, and confusion is exactly how payments get missed or problems get noticed too late. So clarity is power. For context, this kind of guidance comes from years of helping low-income families, seniors, people with disabilities, and anyone feeling squeezed financially make sense of government benefits and the rules that decide what shows up in their accounts. These programs can be life-changing, but the paperwork, acronyms, and shifting policies can be overwhelming, and the payment schedule in particular can feel unnecessarily complicated when you're simply trying to pay rent and keep up with essentials. That's why breaking it down into plain language matters. The more you understand, the less likely you are to miss a deadline, overlook an increase, or assume a problem is your fault when it's really just a scheduling rule. Also, when you hear terms like retirement benefits, disability benefits, SSI, and survivor benefits, remember they all sit under the broader conversation here. So even if your exact amount is different, the schedule rules and policy changes can still affect you in meaningful ways. Before moving on, make your own quick checklist. Confirm which birthday window you fall into, confirm whether you receive direct deposit, and confirm the contact information for your bank or credit union so you can act fast if something looks off. Small preparation steps like that save huge stress later, especially when people rely on these funds for time-sensitive bills. Quick favor before we dive deeper. Tapping the like button helps this kind of information reach people who desperately need it, especially seniors, families, and people with disabilities who may not have time to hunt through complicated government pages. Now, here's what gets covered in this rundown. The expected payment range for February 2026, the exact deposit dates based on birthday groups, and the major 2026 changes that could lift benefits further and affect how much you keep. On the money side, the range being discussed stretches from around $2,000 up to $5,251 for some recipients, and on the timing side, you'll know precisely which Wednesday applies to you and what to do if a deposit is late. Grab a notebook if you like writing things down, set a reminder if you prefer your phone to do the work, and keep listening because each piece connects to the next and the details add up. Let's begin with February 2026 deposit timing, because that's the question that drives the most anxiety. When exactly does the money hit? The reassuring part is that the first wave is not far off, but the crucial detail is that Social Security does not send everyone's funds on the same day, even if you and your neighbor are both receiving benefits. Payments are staggered across multiple dates, and the two biggest factors are your birthday window and the benefit category, which is why it's possible for two recipients to see deposits on different Wednesdays within the same month. If your birthday lands on the 1st through the 10th of any month, your payment is aligned with the second Wednesday of the month, and in February 2026, that second Wednesday falls on February 11th. If your birthday is the 11th through the 20th, you're placed on the third Wednesday schedule, which for February 2026 lines up with February 18th. If you were born on the 21st through the 31st, your deposit is set for the fourth Wednesday, meaning February 25th, 2026 is your target date. These are the dates to circle, highlight, and treat as your personal checkpoint, because when you know your window, you can plan bills, groceries, rent, and prescriptions with fewer surprises. Now, the moment that sparks panic is when someone checks their account and the deposit isn't there, so let's walk through the recommended response without guesswork. The Social Security Administration advises waiting 3 business days after your scheduled payment date before contacting them. But what most people miss is the smarter first move that can save you time. Check with your financial institution first. Call your bank or credit union. Verify that your account is active and there are no holds or issues, and ask whether a payment attempted to arrive, or whether anything could have blocked it from posting. If your bank confirms everything looks normal on their end, then you wait out those 3 business days, and only after that window do you contact Social Security to investigate the missing payment officially. That order matters because it reduces false alarms, and it helps you gather the right information before you speak to Social Security, which can make the process smoother. With timing covered, let's shift to the numbers, because understanding the potential range keeps expectations grounded while still recognizing what the program lists as possible at the top end. For most recipients, the maximum Social Security payment in 2026 is stated as $5,181 per month, and that figure represents the upper limit many people hear about in headlines. However, there's an additional high-end scenario worth knowing. If you file for Social Security at age 70 in 2026, the maximum monthly amount is described as reaching up to $5,251, which is a notable jump for those who qualify under that timing. At the same time, it's important to be real about what most households see, because the maximum is not what the average person receives. The average Social Security payment is around $1,196 per month, which comes out to just over $2,000 monthly for many retirees, and that average gives a better snapshot of what typical budgets are working with. If you receive SSI, SSDI, survivor benefits, or spousal benefits, your specific amount can differ, but the key takeaway is that you are still seeing increases connected to the cost of living adjustment that has already kicked in. Now, watch this, because the bigger conversation is not only about a single month's deposit, but about the 2026 changes that can influence benefit growth, work rules, and the schedule itself. One major change revolves around COLA, the annual cost of living adjustment designed to keep benefit checks moving with inflation so that buying power doesn't collapse as prices rise. In 2026, the COLA increase is 2.8%, and while that number might sound modest at first glance, it still translates into real dollars for millions of people who depend on these payments. For the average retiree, a 2.8% COLA is described as adding about $56 per month, taking the average payment from $1,940 up to $1,996. Which sounds small but adds up across a year of groceries, utilities, or medication costs. But there's an issue that makes many people feel like the increase disappears: Medicare. Part B premiums increase as well, and that premium growth can consume part of the COLA, so the net improvement feels smaller than expected. Even with that frustration, there's a potentially bigger development in motion. The metric used to calculate COLA may be changing, and that shift is being pushed by senators, lawmakers, experts, and analysts who argue that the current system doesn't reflect the reality of older and disabled households. Right now, the COLA formula uses CPIW, the Consumer Price Index for workers, which is built around the spending patterns of working Americans. The criticism is that CPIW takes inflation data tied to workers and applies it to seniors and disability benefit recipients, even though their typical spending can be concentrated in different areas. The alternative being advocated is CPIE, the Consumer Price Index for the elderly, which focuses on how much seniors actually spend on essential categories like rent, mortgages, groceries, prescriptions, and utilities, and then bases COLA on that senior-focused spending picture. According to analysts and experts, if CPIE is adopted, the increase in benefits could land somewhere between $300 and $500 for a large group of about 74 million recipients, spanning Social Security, SSI, SSDI, Veterans Affairs benefits, railroad retirement, and disability-related benefits. On COLA, it helps to think of it as the built-in yearly adjustment that tries to keep your benefit from falling behind inflation, and that's why people pay close attention not just to the percentage, but to the method used to calculate it. When the calculation is based on CPIW, the concern raised is that it may understate the real-world pressure seniors face, because spending on essentials like housing, food, medicine, and utilities can take up a larger share of the budget as people age or deal with disability. That's the heart of why the CPIE proposal gets so much attention. It aims to measure the cost increases that hit elderly households hardest, then reflect that in the COLA, instead of relying on a worker-focused basket of expenses. If CPIE is adopted and the benefits rise in the $300 to $500 range discussed, that kind of change could reshape monthly budgeting decisions, which is why the push is framed as urgent but also practical, real money for real bills. And while commenting on a video might sound small, it's presented as a way to demand publicly, and pairing that with direct outreach to lawmakers strengthens the message that recipients are watching and expecting action. That is why there's a call to action attached to this proposal. If you support the COLA calculation change, the suggested move is to comment that you support a Social Security increase or that you support CPIE. And the broader message is that voices matter because change rarely happens when people stay quiet. Another major change is the earnings test limits, and this one directly affects beneficiaries who are still working while collecting monthly payments. Yes, it is allowed to work and receive Social Security at the same time, but if you have not reached full retirement age, you face income limits that can trigger withholding of part of your Social Security benefits. Many people describe this as both painful and unfair, especially for seniors who worked for decades, contributed into the system, and then feel punished when they continue working after retirement. In 2026, the earnings test limits are higher, maybe not by a dramatic amount, but enough to matter to households trying to stretch income without losing benefits. For workers who will not reach full retirement age in 2026, the limit is listed as $24,480 before benefits are affected, and the rule above that line is clear. For every $2 you earn over the threshold, $1 in Social Security benefits is withheld. That withholding formula is why some call it shocking and argue it needs to change, with the strongest view being that it should be eliminated entirely, so seniors are not penalized for wanting or needing to work. A third change involves the payment schedule itself, because even when the system follows a consistent pattern, the timing can get complicated in months where weekends and holidays shift when deposits or payments land. In 2026, Social Security payments are presented as following a steady schedule, but certain months can still feel tricky when the calendar creates delays or shifts, so it helps to know what normal looks like in practice. For example, January payments went out on the 14th, 21st, and 28th, and February follows with the 11th, 18th, and 25th, which matches the Wednesday-based pattern tied to birthday groups. It's possible to lay out the entire year's schedule, but the approach here is to keep the breakdown simple and continue providing updates with payment dates and amounts so you always know what to expect without getting overwhelmed by a full year chart. So who benefits from these changes and discussions? The estimate given is about 74 million Americans, including retired workers and their families, people receiving Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, SSI recipients, including elderly and disabled individuals, surviving spouses and children, veterans receiving VA benefits tied to Social Security, and railroad retirement beneficiaries. If you're a parent raising children on survivor benefits, a veteran dealing with a disability, someone who cannot work because of health issues, or a retiree who put in a lifetime of labor, the point is that this money is earned or qualified for, and you deserve to know exactly what you're getting and when it arrives. Here's some genuinely good news to keep perspective. Even if a 2.8% COLA feels modest in the moment, Social Security benefits are designed to be protected from inflation over time through annual adjustments that aim to keep pace with rising costs. It's not a perfect system, and it doesn't always match the pressure families feel at the checkout counter, but the yearly adjustment is meant to keep payments from falling behind forever. And if the CPIE approach becomes the standard, the outcome described is hundreds of dollars more each month for tens of millions of people, which is practical support that can go toward groceries, prescriptions, rent, and utilities. Now, let's turn the information into an action plan that's easy to follow. Start by matching your birthday to the correct Wednesday group and marking your payment date somewhere you will actually notice it, because knowing the date in advance reduces stress and helps prevent missed bills. If you have direct deposit set up, that puts you in a strong position for speed and security. If you do not, it's worth considering the switch, because direct deposit is typically faster and safer than waiting on other delivery methods. If your payment is missing on your scheduled date, remember the order. Contact your bank or credit union first, then wait 3 business days, and only then contact Social Security if the funds still haven't arrived. On the policy side, the push for CPIE is framed as one of the most meaningful potential upgrades. So if you support it, make your stance visible by commenting that you back a Social Security increase or that you back CPIE, and also reach out to lawmakers, because the possible $300 to $500 monthly improvement is too significant to ignore. Finally, look beyond Social Security alone, because additional programs are mentioned as possible lifelines for many households, including SNAP benefits, Medicaid, LIHEAP support for heating and cooling costs, and prescription assistance. And exploring eligibility can sometimes bring relief where one program cannot. When you review other support programs, the idea isn't to replace Social Security, but to supplement it so the budget has breathing room, especially for households facing high medical costs or high energy bills. Programs like SNAP and Medicaid can reduce out-of-pocket spending in ways that effectively free up cash for rent or transportation. And LIHEAP can help stabilize heating and cooling costs so a sudden bill doesn't wipe out the month. Even prescription assistance can matter, because medication costs can swing dramatically, and every saved dollar is a dollar you can redirect to necessities. Keep your focus on the 3 essentials from this update. Know your payment day, know your expected range, and know which policy levers, like the COLA formula and earnings limits, are being debated and adjusted. That combination turns confusion into a plan, and it helps you advocate for yourself instead of feeling stuck on the outside of a complicated system. And let's be honest about the frustration people feel. $56 more a month does not solve every problem, and it can be discouraging when Medicare premiums reduce the impact. But knowing the rules, the schedule, and the proposed changes puts you back in control. When you can predict what you receive, confirm when it should show up, and understand what could increase it, you're not stuck reacting. You're planning. You've worked hard. You've contributed, and you deserve every dollar you qualify for, along with a clear explanation of how the system works without complicated language. If you have questions, put them in the comments, and the promise is to answer them, because support matters in both good times and difficult times. And if your situation changes, work hours, household expenses, or benefit type, return to these same checkpoints so you always stay aligned with the schedule and the rules that decide your payment. And if you want to keep getting updates on benefits, programs, and resources that can help you and your family, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next update. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and keep moving forward with clarity and confidence. Char count 18072.